welcome back to Watercolor Studio 42, and this afternoon I'm going to be doing a little bit of a type of way of enlarging a picture, sometimes using a graph or a grid. And I thought I'd do a profile. Last week I was doing, last time I was in, I did a little bit of showing you how to do the proportions of the face using the egg shape for the head and so forth, eyes halfway. So a lot of times you work with a grid. You can buy grid paper that already has the squares on it, and but of course I made this one up myself, and I was thinking of doing flowers, which is a lot of fun. You can work a lot of different things into the grid. But I decided to do a profile because last week I did the front view of the head. So this is a side view of the head. And I picked on an Indian profile. And I'm just finishing up. I'll just show you a little bit. I'm just drawing the marker lines in. And if you're going to use a marker, you just have to make sure it's a permanent marker so that when you wet it, it's not going to blur. So that's the only thing about that. Now, I guess I got most all the lines in. If you want the features to kind of jump out in certain areas, what I do, you can use a larger marker. But if you don't have a larger marker, I just move the ruler over a little bit, and as I move it over, I just make some of the lines a little bit wider so that you do get a variety of the width of lines. And I always emphasize variety in my work that I do, a variety of shapes, a variety of color, of course, repeating colors too. And texture, whatever. But shapes and things are very important, I think, when you're doing a variety of things, especially working on designs. And because my thing used to be doing a lot of fashion drawings, but then all of a sudden, by the time I graduated, everything had kind of turned over to photography. They weren't hiring illustrators anymore. So I ended up getting into teaching art in the public schools. And I'm still at it a little bit. This virus that we've had has slowed things down a bit as far as being able to work with folks. But hopefully everything will get better with time. Just make that a little bit heavier there. So a variety of lines and shapes and whatnot. Now, once you have this laid in, now I did those grid lines with a pencil, so I can erase them if I don't want a particular line or shape or whatever. I could just erase that, and a lot of times you can almost erase through the watercolor paint, as long as it's not, if you don't put it on too heavy, too thick. And you can take out some of those lines. Now, whether you want to leave the grid markings on, you can, or you can erase them. And so a lot of times I just kind of leave them in. Now, you can do all sorts of things with a grid. In fact, there's another exercise I considered doing where you can just take each individual square and make a different pattern within each individual square, or you can make an alternating repetitional type of pattern. It depends on how you want to approach it. So I'm just going to go over this a little bit more and just thicken some of the lines with the marker, okay? And then we'll be all set to decide how we're going to paint it in. And you can decide on a lot of things, how you want the background. You can almost paint the whole thing like like you would a checkerboard type of pattern. But we'll see what happens. I'm going to go to the edge with this line, right down to the edge, and whatnot, something like this. Okay, let's fill that in. I'm just making some of the lines a little bit wider than others, just for bringing the emphasis out of the form and shapes. Maybe a little bit more on the profile. We can kind of bring this in a little bit. Right on the nose, huh? Something like that. And add a little bit more. You can make any type of decoration you want on the beads. Indian, the chief, he has a fancy feathered type of headdress and so forth. So, like I said, I did the grid in pencil, and if you want to erase it afterwards, you can. If you do the lines light enough, usually by the time you paint it in, the lines don't show. So that's the way that works. So I guess I'm all set to start in with the painting part. Now I've got a line that comes in here. It sort of stops, so I've got to kind of have it finish off somewhere here. I'm just going to drop that down. Sometimes you can make sort of a fancy necklace. Just to bring that down into there, just to break it up a little bit. Maybe something over here. And that's about it. Okay, so now when I usually do a painting, in this case, if you want it to be like outside, I do the background first. And this could be an Indian on a reservation out wherever, Arizona, out in the western states. So let's see what we can do. All right, background. So we'll just make it. Oh, by the way, the sky lately, the color, a lot of that smoke, and it's in the higher elevations of the sky. But it does make everything kind of look sort of yellow. You can't really see a nice clear blue sky because of the color and of the smoke in the sky. Makes for a beautiful sunset because when the sun goes down, it's sort of an orangey color. Really, really pretty. Maybe I can show you some of that color. Right in the yellow, there, you get some of that color. And a nice sunset. Just bring that down a little bit lower into here. Okay, I'm going to bring this out further to the edge. Here we go. It's kind of light. Now what I'm going to do is come back into that, make that a little deeper down in through here. Okay, here you go. And if you wet the paper first when you do the sky, you don't have to worry about the brush marks. You just wash them, fade them out like that. Arizona sunset or sunrise. I say Arizona, it could be any of those states out there, New Mexico and so forth, Wyoming, even California, whatever. Montana, those areas. Okay, here you go. Okay, we'll let that go for now. And then as far as the landscape goes, the deserts aren't all just sand. They're not just sand. But there's some sort of vegetation. So they refer to some of the deserts as being, sort of here you go. Something like that. And you can put some sand in there. I use a little bit of raw sienna. Here you go. So we got some of that background in there. Okay, so that's good. Like I said, you can come back and come in with a much stronger color. I think sometimes some of my paintings that I do after they dry, sometimes they come out too light. You really need another coat of a little darker color. Yeah, paint that in a bit. Now, as far as the garments goes, well, years ago, I guess they used to wear animal skins, leather or whatever, fur, that type of thing. And nowadays, I guess they kind of dress like, whatever the style we have. Now, let's see. Got there. Just put a little darker color in here. Here we go. Okay. Every so often they have powwows. They used to have them over at La Follette in that large parking area. I never got a chance to get over there, but I would read about it in the paper. It had sometimes the headdress was kind of different then. Little whiter feathers. And with just a little bit of shading in them. Just a little bit of shading. I don't want to get too I don't want to take too much of the white out of them. Something like that. So grids are very helpful sometimes when you're drawing a picture. It used to be the old way of enlarging the picture, You'd start off with a grid of, let's say, a ½ inch, and if you want the picture to be twice the size, you might go up to doing a grid on a larger sheet of paper, maybe twice the size of the original. This happened to be a 1-inch grid that I made up of squares. Like get some brighter color in the ear in this little headband. Just try to see what it looks like. The costumes are very bright, and the Indian blankets are really nice works of art. I picked up one time. We visited one of my cousin's sister-in-law, sister-in-law, and she was working at a motel. She was working out there in Phoenix, And we stayed a week with her, rented a car, and took a lot of nice day trips. And one of my favorite trips was going up through Sedona to the southern ridge of the Grand Canyon. What a beautiful place that was. Wish I could have spent more time at the canyon, because they said during the course of the day, the way the sun would move around, it would change colors. Okay. Get a little fancy in there. I'll leave a little bit of white in there. Finish some of the shading in the feathers here. Sometimes you just use the paint you have on the brush. Or you can go a little bit darker. So this is sort of doing a picture using the grid idea. Okay. Probably there's going to be more shadow down around here. I haven't decided where the light's coming from, but if it's brighter there, everything should be on the opposite, like brighter on the right side and a little bit in the shadow on the left side. Something like that. Oops, I wanted to leave that a little whiter in there. Okay, something like that. Now as we go along, we could kind of work a little bit more color. I like the orange. Let's put a little bit of orange in here. Oops. It's more red than orange. I could add more yellow to it, yes. Much more. Looking orange? Not really. Still sort of red. So having said that, I'll take that out of there. Yeah. Maybe push some of that red out. Get a little bit more orangey shade in there. Yeah, just brush it out. I'm not getting as much like I wanted orange. Sometimes you just have to get a tube of orange to make that work. I'm just going by the colors that you see, you know, in the movies and National Geographic magazines, on television too. I've never actually been to a festival, but I've seen the different shows that have the activities going on. Okay, I kind of made the nose a little bit sharp there. Probably should have tempered that off a little bit more. Let's see, that's going to be the bright side. And then over here, I'm going to be a little bit more in the shadow. Something like that. Now, as I mentioned before, when you do flesh tones, you probably would be better off to wet the paper so that you don't have any or too many brush marks. Just soft complexion. Of course, if anyone, no matter who it is, if you spend a lot of time outdoors, especially in the summertime, what happens is your skin gets sort of leathery. I don't know if you've ever noticed that with farmers that work outdoors all summer. The skin gets very leathery. Maybe it brings on wrinkles too. I'm not sure about that. I don't dare to say. But sometimes you get a little bit too much sun. Let's see what we can do here. Sometimes they put some more markings on the face. That's what those were supposed to be, some of the markings. So when they're at their festivities, wigwams and so forth, everything's set up. They have quite a festival. And go a little darker shadow on the neck. Pull that out. Okay. Now, if you don't have the person to look at, sometimes you have to try to paint from memory, you know, as far as the features go. And I could probably do almost a pretty good looking head, but I really have to spend more time with the person to get the sort of the likeness to them. You know, you have to have them kind of model for you and not try to do things from memory. But there is shadow underneath here. We can make that a little bit darker. Underneath the neck here. And now the beads can be multicolored. You can make them different colors. And a lot of times their ornaments and things that they wear are usually things from nature. It tends not to be too much metal, but shells and stones and so forth that have been ground softer from their environment. In other words, you know, what they might find out there. Now, as far as the color, let's separate this a little bit more. I wanted to separate that from a little bit from the landscape, the figure. Let's make this a little bit thicker through here, there. I'm going to bring it out a little bit more. And what I was saying that the deserts aren't just sand, there's a lot of growth. I guess they call it like a botanical desert type of thing. That's when you have a lot of plants and things, and not just sand. And it's interesting because if you've ever visited, I think it's very hard because of the weather being so warm. It's hard to grow grass on your lawn. So what a lot of people will do is they just have stones. The grass is replaced by just pebbles. They have a lot of pebbles on the lawns. And it's nice. It's very attractive. Okay. Just fill this down here with some green. But I want to see if I could do something else with that. Add some more color into that. There you go. And what I was saying was that I was going to mention about Indian blankets, and they do some beautiful blankets, the patterns and so forth. And they're sort of like worked out, more like a grid pattern. Okay, let's try to blend this out a little bit here. I don't want to leave too much white in there. You kind of get the idea how this works. Now, you can add more texture. I haven't finished the headband yet. The more feathers I guess you have, the higher position you have in the tribe. The chief usually is the one that has a nice fancy headband. I'll try some blue in there, see if that works. Oops. The blue kind of turns gray there. Very pretty colors. See if I can get that a little bit more bluer color. Whoops. A little bit dark. Maybe I can pull some of that out, bring it over into some of the other areas. Yeah, that's better. So you can make all sorts of different designs. You could probably buy the grid paper ahead of time. You don't have to I just measured it out, put tape around the border, and the width of the tape is 1 inch, and the paper itself was 11 by 15, so that reduced the size in here down to about 9 by 12. So, there you go. The eyes are going to be a little bit darker. Yeah. Now let's continue on. Just do some feathers here. A lot of times you could sort of paint sort of more texture and details in with the brush. You don't have to draw everything out. If you draw everything out, it could very easily turn into just a pencil drawing, not so much of using the paint. Yeah. Kind of dabble around a little bit. Maybe some of the feathers over here are going to be more in the shadow. Well, I guess some of these Indian headbands, the feathers can go down back quite a ways. Just take some of that white out. You let some of the white paper show through. And I brought this in here. Okay. Now, speaking of profiles, of course, we lost the profile on one of the, up in New Hampshire, the Old Man of the Mountain. But the Old Man of the Mountain wasn't really an Indian profile. There is another place up there, and I think it's called Indian Head, and that's still there. Nothing happened to that. But the Old Man of the Mountain disappeared, and well, it broke off. And they tried to reinforce it over the years, but eventually, I guess Mother Nature won out on that one. So they talked about trying to do something to reestablish the profile, And at the base, I think it's Mirror Lake that's around the base of that. They put up some information and pictures of what it was like. I was fortunate to be up in New Hampshire quite a bit and visited there. We climbed a relatively smaller hill near that area that you could look down at Mirror Lake, and they called it Painter's Bluff or something. A lot of artists would go up there to paint. It's a nice area. Okay, see what I can do with this. Too light in through here. But anyways, so they still do have a Indian head, and I think at the base of that, across the road, there's a restaurant. I don't know if it's a motel there or what, but could be. Been there a few times. And then another good profile is Profile Rock down in our neighborhood in Freetown, which is next door to Lakeville. And they have a place where you can park your car. I guess they call it Freetown State Park now. And you can walk in. I wouldn't say it's more than maybe 600 feet or so, maybe an eighth of a mile, to Profile Rock. And that's lower, it's just a ledge, and you have to get at it walk around it at a certain angle, but it's a good profile of the Indian. And just recently I read a little bit about it. I guess within Freetown State Park, there's a place where there's a pretty high ledge, and it seems like somebody tried to jump off the ledge. It said in the paper it was like 90 feet. That's pretty high. Anyways, I guess the water wasn't very deep where they jumped, and I guess the person got injured pretty bad. I didn't hear too much about it. It was just briefly mentioned. But I guess somewhere in that park there's quite a ledge there. Right almost in the center of the town. Not too far from the fire station there, where you turn to go to the park. But it's a nice place to visit. And it's not that far away. Then there's King Philip Rock or something over in Rehoboth there. I've seen the sign, read a little bit about it, but I've never visited there. Of course, at first, when the settlers came over, I guess the Pilgrims came over, and they settled in the Plymouth area. The Indians had excuse me, the Indians had stayed in that area for quite a while. And they had sort of like a plague or something that happened. And I guess a lot of the Indians left that Plymouth area. And so when the Pilgrims came over, I guess they weren't invading any Indian reservations or property. So that's how they ended up settling there. And there were still a few Indians that were there that helped them out, kind of showed them how to plant and so forth. Was one of the Indians Somerset or something like that? Somerset, whatever. All the areas, a lot of the places around there have, of course, the Indian names. The Cape, like Mashpee and all those are Indian names. I don't know if I can make this flip, because if the paint's still wet, it's hard to do much with it, but I have to wait until that's drier. But that just gives you an idea how you can go about doing a sort of a grid painting. Now, you can add a lot more to it. Now, what I don't have as much time, a lot of times I'll let certain areas dry, and then after it's dry, then when you come back to paint in an area, it doesn't bleed anymore. The colors don't mix on the surface. So if you put a particular shadow or something in, it usually stays there. I don't want that. It's a little bit, it's a little bit dark. Right under the nose here. But that's why you have to sometimes let it dry. If you try to keep painting wet into wet, you run into problems with it. You know, not holding its shape, it just kind of settles into the paper. So if certain areas are drier, you can come back in, like this should be a darker shadow over here, underneath the chin. You can go a little bit deeper. I'm going to take that out of there, blend that out. Maybe a shadow around the headband in there. Those different colors. Now, also with this, I've got to add a little bit more color all around the border, because I put tape down so that when I pull the tape off, it creates sort of like a false border or a mat around it. So I have to make sure I have a contrast of color here. Just fill that in. Okay, up into the corner, maybe a little bit more shadow. Just to give us the contrast, you'll see what I mean when we pull the tape. Now we've had this summer was an exceptionally warm summer, and normally I go out painting somewhere like Westport and paint on location. But this summer it was so warm that I didn't go too far. And of course we had problems not wanting us to go too far. And so the place that I usually paint would be out on my deck on the table, picnic table, and go from there. You can paint a picture not having to go too far. In the local area, and sometimes you can paint just looking off your deck of your house, because where I live there's a lot of woods up there and back, and I've done a few paintings of just my backyard. And now we have a shed there. We never had a shed before, but within the last 5-6 years we decided that wouldn't be a bad idea to have the shed to store the deck chairs and the tables and so forth. So now we have that, and the shed matches the color of the house and all that. The people that built the shed, I think they they either moved or they changed the location. They were down in South Attleboro on Route 1. And now that's all been changed over. I don't know what they're going to put in there, but they've been removing an awful lot of ledge. A lot of ledge everywhere around, even in my yard. I've got some big rocks up in the back. Okay. Well, this is still wet, so if I keep tampering with it, all I'm doing is just blending in all the colors. And seems like I should have a little bit more of a darker chin in here. Some of the war paint or whatever they use for decorations, that's kind of got washed out because I tried to put the markings in while the paper was too wet. Now that's one thing about watercolor. It can be frustrating because we sometimes don't have the patience to let it dry. And usually if it's a sort of a damp day and so forth, everything takes a little bit longer to dry. But if you're outside on a sunny day, you don't want to be out there directly in the sun. I usually have an umbrella that I bring along, and I'm in the shade looking out into the sun. And it's so true what they say, the brighter the day, the darker the shadows. And you'll find that to be very true. I mentioned earlier about how the sky has been kind of different color lately. And normally the nose wouldn't be that sharp. That nose is like when I do a Picasso painting sometimes, that's what happens there. So anyhow, maybe that's not quite the shape of the chin either. I was trying to stay too much with the squares, I guess. So what else is there to add? I don't know. I suppose we could put a couple little drops of color up into here. Repeat some of the red into here. Something like that. Just spread it out a little bit. Blend it in. Now you'll find that the drier the paper is, the more the color will hold its shape there. It won't kind of blend in too much. Lighten up this headband here. And put a little bit more yellow in that. Usually they don't have too much, like I said earlier, not so much metal. It's usually shells and things, rocks and things that they use for decoration, even the feathers from the birds, so forth. I'm going to just add a little bit more, a little darker blue up in the air. I got some strong blue down there, but I don't have too much in here. This looks kind of faded out. Maybe we could get something up in here. Pull that out. Yeah. Kind of blend it down into here. A little touch of red, maybe. Repeat the red up into there some, a little bit up in there. So, we're getting there. Now, I do these different things just to show you if you are hesitant about painting, sometimes you can just use a ruler and just divide the paper up into sort of irregular shapes, geometric shapes, and just do designs. It doesn't have to be anything it doesn't have to be realistic or representative of any particular thing. Okay. Now, I'm just going to put a little bit more color into here. Repeat some of that red, maybe a little bit more over here. Distribution of color. Now every time you start out to do something, there's always something that comes along that you make it come out a little different. Now see, this doesn't have much contrast in here. So what we do is sometimes take your brush and use a brush like a sponge, and we can lift that back out. Make it contrast a little bit more. There we go. Now, what I usually do, or have been doing lately, rather than bringing in an actual mat and laying it on there, I've been just taping it around the sides. Now, when I took a class up in Dedham, the teacher would always have us put a mat around that paper. It's kind of a false mat, but anyways. Gives you an idea what it would look like. Usually you put a mat in and then you set this thing inside of a frame and under glass, or you don't use real glass, use plexiglass. Whoops. Okay, not too bad. Cleaned it up a little bit. Very good tape, by the way. Sticking to me today. Okay, so there's a little bit, like I said, touch up. But the only problem is, like I said, if you're still painting things, when the paper's wet, it won't stay there. It will kind of disappear, blend in. So that gives you an idea what that looks like. Sometimes you have to, when you put the tape on, just press it near the edge, and so there you go. I think the mouth needs to be a little bit more emphasized, but because I couldn't use the marker because the paint's wet, so that's how that turned out. Now, sometimes you can go outside the edge if you want. Sometimes you can make it look like, it's not confined by a border. So sometimes when you make a mistake, if the paint gets underneath this thing, you can either pull it out and make it look that way, or you can actually cut a mat and put a mat around it to cover the contour. There was one lady, she used to do paintings, and she used to mount her artwork so that you saw the whole piece of paper, and it wasn't hidden by a mat or anything. But you could see the whole piece of paper, and you have to let it dry before you can sign it too. I usually sign mine just B.H. Macomber. And I usually don't put the date. If I put the date on it, it's usually on the back. I keep a record of when I did the painting, you know, like September 2020. So that's about it. So I still have a little bit of time, but this just gives you an idea how you can go about. And you can still see the pencil marks showing through where I divided it up into a grid, you know. When you let it dry sometimes, believe it or not, you can take a good eraser and erase right through the paint if you want. Sometimes I just leave the marks in, but you may not want those marks in here on the face itself, so you can erase it. But as far as the background goes, you could probably leave some of the markings in there just for a little bit of texture. Just gives you an idea how that works. And whatnot. Now, as far as the art shows go, I don't think none of them have been running this summer. Usually the Attleboro Museum, they'll be having their auction, but apparently it's going to be done on TV or on computers and so forth. It's not going to be kind of made the eyebrow a little dark, but it's going to be one of those auctions where I guess you have to bid on TV, however that works out. But so a lot of things have been eliminated, canceled, and whatnot this year. So I usually do 2 or 3 art shows during the summer, but this year nothing's been running, you know. So they have a good show. I don't know if they're going to have it this year. I haven't heard too much about it. But up at Stony Brook, up in Norfolk area, they always have a good art show, and there's plenty of parking there. I couldn't believe how they mow a huge field on the grounds, and you can park a car and so forth. Whether they do it again this year, I don't know. But usually when they have it, it's usually the first Saturday in October. But I haven't heard too much about it. I got to check in on it to see if it's running. I haven't heard whether they've had to cancel it or not, but that's a good one to take in. And usually the city, downtown, they have different things that you can take in also. But I think the museum's going to be mostly done by communicating through television, computers, or whatever they use. So that's about it. And thanks for being with us. And till next time, brushes up, and we'll see you a little bit later, okay? Thanks a lot.